Everyone, welcome to Grid Live Wrap Up. The Charlotte ROVAL maybe be remembered for being dominated by Shane Van Gisbergen, but for Trackhouse Racing, the sting of defeat might overshadow the thrill of victory for some. MotoGP, Marc Marquez got injured. We'll have a full update, plus F1 at Singapore. First night race at F1 introduced. Is the race living up to that hype? I'm Joe Samiega. With me, Kobe Lambeth from Grid Tonight, Matthew Bro from GridNetworkTV.com, and Tanner Smith, editor from the Pitbox Press. A big thank you to our Patreon investors, and you could scan the QR code and get to our Patreon page to invest in the Grid Network. A big thank you to Colin, Michelle, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew for investing in the Grid Network each and every month through Patreon. Link in the video description. Click on that link. Takes you to our Patreon website. From there, you select the amount, and every month, your contribution, your investment will go towards the Grid Network, helping us stay on the air. Pay the bills. You could do a one-time investment through Buy Me a Coffee, YouTube Super Chat, and simplest way to support us, click the subscribe button, hit that bell icon so you don't miss any of our programs, and I'll let you know this. Definitely, we thank everyone for tuning in this morning. We had a good, strong showing and encourage everyone to participate in the chat room. We'd love to hear everyone's opinions and takes, especially as we start off with the NASCAR Cup Series, the Bank of America ROVAL 400. A dominant performance by Shane Van Gisbergen. I think really if this was a regular season race, that would be the headline. Shane Van Gisbergen, another dominant win. We move on to the next race in the regular season, but this is the playoffs. So for Shane Van Gisbergen's teammate, a heartbreaking elimination for Ross Chastain with 2 laps to go. Chastain, older tires, he was up to 4 points ahead of Joey Logano for that final transfer spot into the round of 8. Then when he started the final lap, 1 point above the cut line ahead of Denny Hamlin. He lost that position in that hairpin corner, sliding, going wide. Denny Hamlin got on the inside. Looked like Denny was going to be able to put Ross Chastain in the bad spot. Tied with Joey Logano having the tiebreaker. But as they entered that final hairpin to get to the front stretch, we saw Ross Chastain try another desperate move. This time just going full, almost all out. Not full throttle, but really just aiming for Denny Hamlin. Spin out Denny Hamlin, but he gets spun as well too. Puts the car in reverse, floors it, but it was too little too late. Joey Logano gets to the finish line ahead of Ross Chastain. So Ross Chastain eliminated from the playoff. Joey Logano advances to the round of 8. What a move by Chastain. Just desperation and the playoffs. Of course, he is famously known for the Hail Melon at Martinsville. He needed those 2 positions. He got a lot more by putting that car up against the wall flat out, not letting off until he hit, out of all the people, Denny Hamlin at the finish line and got around him for advancing the championship 4. But this did not work. This reminded me more of Kevin Harvick's attempt on wrecking Kyle Busch on the last lap at Martinsville. Ended up spinning himself out and Kevin Harvick being eliminated. Tanner, does Chastain move on Hamlin make the sport look less serious?
I want to both condemn the move, but also talk about how difficult it was to even get to Hamlin from that far back. He entered the final sequence of corners about 8/10 behind Hamlin because of the tire disadvantage that he had to the 11 car, and Ross Chastain managed to not only completely overshoot the entry, obviously on purpose, but he was carrying so much speed that he was able to clip the tire wall that was on the inside of the first right-hander in the chicane, completely sideswipe Hamlin, spin them both out, and I think had Ross been able to somehow, get his car on the rebound with Hamlin when they hit a second time while they were spinning onto the front stretch, I think had he been able to get a little bit more rebound there, he might have been able to pull it off. With that said, that obviously isn't what happened, and yeah, it always comes down to the playoffs and kind of what you think of them. Obviously, the move was extremely insane, super desperate. I think anybody and their mother could tell that, and I do think that in a way it tells a compelling story, but I think we've got to really sink our teeth back into the situation here. We're talking about the eighth and tenth best drivers this year, fighting for a couple spots in a cutoff race that's completely manufactured. Why do they still have a chance, quote unquote, to race for a championship at this point in the season when they clearly haven't earned it compared to drivers like William Byron, Ryan Blaney, Denny Hamlin, Christopher Bell, Kyle Larson, etc. So yeah, I think the move was exciting. Again, I think that it was extremely hard to pull off to even get to Hamlin and try to make something happen. But at the end of the day, it brings you back to the playoff system. And personally, I don't want to see drivers have to do stuff like that or feel that they have to do stuff like that. I think that desperation should be a little bit more prized than abused like it is in NASCAR. I think that this format rewards it far too often, and I just don't think that it's a good look for the sport when you have guys out there just flying in 20 miles per hour faster than they're supposed to and colliding with a driver completely recklessly. I just don't think that's a good look. I don't think it's a good look when Xfinity drivers start passing other guys under yellow on the final lap because they think it might enhance their playoff advantage as well. So, we saw it in two different series in the span of about 24 hours where the playoff format as a whole kind of got exposed yet again as just another cheap gimmick in the France family's playbook.
Yeah, I think this move definitely, although it was exciting, although it will likely be the number one most viewed marketing tool for NASCAR, like the Hail Melon was 3 years prior, unfortunately, it brings bad light to a sport that's down bad, for a lack of a better term. I guess that's more of a my generation type of thing, maybe a little younger, that phrase. But yeah, it was silly, but you gotta respect it because there is no one who has the melons in this sport besides Ross Chastain to do silly things like that. Whether it's the Hail Melon, nobody else has ever thought to do that. He goes out and does it. And then going from however many feet back on old tires to try to, I don't know what he was thinking besides trying to make the transfer. Take a look at what he did there. He wrecked himself. He wrecked Hamlin. But it's just one of those things that happens. But yeah, it definitely doesn't look good for the sport. But from an outside perspective, you have to give Chastain kind of the nod. Although it was silly, nothing happened from it, I mean, you got to respect it. That's why I'm giggling. That's why I actually met Ross Chastain wearing the shirt at Utica Rome when he made a appearance. So thanks, Ross. This is a Christopher Bell term. Maybe we'll see Team Penske and Joey Logano wearing it on Monday because ultimately, yeah, thank you to them. It is funny that he crossed the line right behind Logano, even though he was backwards, too. And I joked on Twitter or X, whatever we call it nowadays, if I had a nickel for every time a former or current colleague racing driver finished this race backwards across the line, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, obviously, but it's weird that it happened twice because not only did Ross Chastain, former colleague Xfinity driver, finish the race backwards, AJ Allmendinger got hit by Suarez, slammed the wall. Suarez trying to come back onto the track, which we'll talk about, and Allmendinger reversed it across the line too. So I just wanted to point that out. I thought that was kind of a weird coincidence, or I guess it'd be ironic. Either way, yeah, silly. It does make the sport look less serious, but I guess for NASCAR in general, a lot of people are looking at you less serious. The fact that Ross Chastain, like Tanner had mentioned, had to try to do something like that to try to advance. And like the 8th and 10th best drivers really this season are fighting like that to where that was really the only action that was worth watching, it seemed like, the last couple laps, considering Shane Van Gisbergen had a 15 second lead. But no, I mean, that was incredible. So shout out him. I had Wendy's yesterday. Of course, I did. Look at me. But that's what you get a free Frosty, I think, with the top 10. I think they got 2 of them, too, with Suarez. But, yeah, it was silly, made the sport look less serious. But I guess it's good for the attention for the sport. I don't know what else it really does. It just sucks. Chastain is, though, I give him credit where I think credit's due. I know desperate times call for desperate measures. It was a silly move, but at the same time, who else in this sport would try something like that? And I don't know if there's anyone besides Ross Chastain that would try to send it from they're in Concord. So where is he, in Mooresville, trying to make the pass there? But good for him. So that's tip my invisible cap to him for that. But fortunately, he's eliminated. Now he's back to 11th, 1 spot ahead of SVG because the points reset. So Shane's 12th, Ross is 11th, Bubba's 10th, Tyler Reddick's now 9th in the standings, as they can make it all the way up to 5th before the season ends.
I have to say, when it comes to the Chastain move, this is something I thought, okay, when you introduce a elimination style format, when you in every position is worth a single point, I felt this was something that, okay, you could expect somebody to give the bumper for that position. And we've seen it, and some of it, I think of, like, for example, Matt Kansas, Joey Logano. Grant, they were fighting for a win. Win, you're in again. But Logano not giving up. We then see it again, and I would say the more egregious version of it, trying to get into playoffs, Austin Dillon, last year, Richmond. Winning, you're in. Second would not cut it. And as he said, he saw red and made 2 bold moves to try to get into the playoffs. NASCAR then said he's not going in the playoffs because of what he did. What I really liked about the Hail Melon was the Hail Melon did not just wipe out somebody. It did not, cause a big crash where you had a bunch of torn up equipment. It was one driver that said, I'm just going to take the sleep of faith flat out against the wall, do a video game move, and see if it works. And it worked. And you saw the team go from we're out to we're in, and just pure elation of we are advancing because of this crazy move, which since then NASCAR has banned. This move, had it worked, I wonder would people be saying, hey, NASCAR, do you really want Ross Chastain to advance through a move like that if you're not going to allow Austin Dillon to do that last year?
They absolutely want that to happen. Because if you remember, Joe, during the broadcast today, they did have a commercial about the playoffs where Austin Dillon, they had it from Joey Logano's rear view camera, the Richmond finish, where, again, Austin Dillon got penalized to the point that he did not advance for that move. So they do want this for their marketing campaign, whether it works or not.
Yeah. Don't you think it is kind of bad, though, that NASCAR has to rely on silly stuff that doesn't matter in order to advance their marketing efforts? Like, you kind of feel bad in a sense.
I don't feel bad.
But I don't know what it's like. They have so many things that they can research and try to figure out how to advance, because obviously the ratings aren't doing well. A lot of people love the system, but more people hate the system. And then they have to rely on illegal stuff, whether it's showing the Ross Chastain move, whether it's showing Austin Dillon, who got stripped of his playoff eligibility, like you said, for trying to send Logano into a different part of Virginia during that race. So it was like, and then Hamlin too. So yeah, I just wanted to add to that. But yeah, it's like it's like you feel bad, but you don't at the same time.
and that's the thing. I feel like there's so many other potential storylines they could focus on, other factors of it. We don't see IndyCar, F1 relying on such clips where it makes you go, is that really good for the sport? And I felt like had this worked, I don't think it would have been exactly the best example of this is what the playoffs do, makes you desperate. Yeah, and Ross Chastain is clearly more willing to make that bold move to advance by gaining just that one more position. This one compared to the Hail Melon, I'm not exactly a huge fan of. What would have NASCAR done? What would the drivers have said? one thing that was very interesting was what Denny Hamlin said in the post-race interview, because he was not exactly happy. And of course, it seems like Denny Hamlin, Ross Chastain, they have a history of crossing paths. Third consecutive week, Denny Hamlin's not happy post-race. Of course, with Ross Chastain essentially dumping him, losing a couple of positions, crossing the start-finish line backwards, which, by the way, besides those two crossing the start-finish line backwards, AJ Allmendinger crossed the start-finish line backwards. It looked like Daniel Suarez, if you have not seen the clip online, because we don't believe USA Network did show the clip post-race.
No, they did. Eventually,
they did.
It took them until literally they were signing the program off.
Thanks for watching. By the way, here's the clip. I mean, Daniel Suarez misses up the corner, tries to get back, hits AJ Allmendinger. Allmendinger puts it backwards, gets across the finish line. Still a top 10 finish for him, so which is very impressive. So you had three drivers cross the finish line backwards, one of them being Denny Hamlin. One of the interesting things, as he was talking to his team post-race, Noah Lewis recorded on social media and posted that Hamlin was essentially saying that he was unaware of the point situation. He had no radio communication about, and, quote, he wouldn't have passed him, Chastain, for the position knowing where he was in. Now, Matt, what do you think of Hamlin's comments considering, well, just last week, he said on Sundays that he is a racer and not a team owner. We have a 100% rule in NASCAR. You're supposedly 100% effort all the time. And now Hamlin is saying that had he known, he wouldn't have not passed Chastain.
I mean, he's 100% right. Hear me out. It's silly to admit guilt there, I guess, in the sense. But if you're Denny Hamlin, I think if you're anyone, why would you want Joey Logano still in the playoffs when you can have Ross Chastain? And that's no offense to Ross Chastain, but he's only made it past the round of 12 once, and when he went on that almost championship run where he ended up losing to Logano. But Logano, for some reason, just clicks in the playoffs. It doesn't matter where he was in the regular season standings or where he somehow got a fuel mileage win here or there. When it comes to the playoffs, Logano just figures it out. So, yeah, I think Denny Hamlin, he was honest at least, and maybe a little too honest by saying, yeah, I probably wouldn't have run Chastain that hard if I knew, which, yeah, it makes sense, but you shouldn't admit it. But it is kind of silly after last week, racing over 100% and taking out his own driver who could have inevitably made it to the next round. Now both his cars, both Bubba Wallace and Tyler Reddick, are eliminated from the playoffs in the same race that his other car, who people forget about, gets disqualified. We'll touch on that a little bit. I don't know what happened to Riley Herbst, but for him to be my 36 of 36 in fantasy and to get disqualified, I think he went from scoring 5 points to 1 or 0, would be 1. So he didn't really do much, but yeah, it is crazy. And yeah, it kind of shows, it's a weird thing. I don't know if Bubba Wallace would be like, oh, well, he's going to race hard. He won't race hard against his non-teammates, but for me, he's going to run me up high into the marbles and put me into the wall to win a race. So I don't think Bubba will really make it. I was just like alluding to that, but it seems like those two are kind of okay with it. But I think Bubba was probably giggling watching the replay of Chastain send his team owner like that. Kind of like that's what you kind of get for ruining both our days that day to let a Chevrolet win, only to almost admit that you would have let another Chevrolet win or get into the playoffs. So there's a lot of confusion going on here in this sport. So yeah, that's kind of just what I say. It's just interesting. I know there's been a lot of penalties lately, at least from what I can recall, of just the whole 100% rule and just drivers doing stuff silly. Obviously, Joe, you alluded to Martinsville last year. And then, was it a couple of years ago? Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if it was the Roval. Was it Cole Custer tried to get Briscoe? I didn't really research this before the show, so please correct me if I'm wrong. But wasn't it something where Cole Custer or Briscoe got penalized at the Roval? Am I making that up or no?
Yeah, for race manipulation. It was 100 points.
Oh, yeah, that's a lot of points. And now Cole Custer, that would take like 10 races to get there. But that is crazy.
He had a decent run today. You
did. It was a top 25. That's actually a good effort for that organization. It really is. So, I mean, shout out to him. But, yeah, that's just how I feel about Hamlin. It's like a weird he seemed distraught. I don't hear me out though. I mean, I said that already, but like it seemed like when Hamlin got out of the car, I've never seen him so confused in his entire life. It was just like, yeah, I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know if I was battling for 10th or 30th. Like, what the heck? Were they not talking to him? I know he said, are they not talking to Ty at New Hampshire a couple weeks prior, but now are they not talking to Denny during the race? Because why didn't he know? That's just, it seemed a little weird to me, that's all. But I guess maybe they didn't tell him knowing that he probably would have let Ross stay in front of him, and they don't want to deal with a possible penalty that would have let Ross and Joey get in. So, yeah, I'm interested to hear what Tanner has to say about this.
Oh, I'm glad you asked, Matthew. I have plenty to say about this. Joe, thank you for writing this question. Denny Hamlin, you are the source of your own problems. You wouldn't even be caught up in this situation if you didn't wreck your driver last week. You would have eliminated both of them. Both drivers. Both guys that you absolutely cannot stand, especially in a round of 8 format. You do this every year, man. You do this every year where you talk yourself up all season long until about race 30, and then you start just crumbling at the slightest bit of any adversity. It is truly astounding how you manage to keep doing this, my dude. I'm gonna chill down. I'm gonna chill out a little bit, but think about it, y'all. Bubba Wallace advances last week. Joey Logano is like, "Thanks, Denny," because obviously Chase Elliott advancing was way more preferable for those above the cut line, as he was also above the cut line. So, not only have you allowed Joey Logano, your worst enemy, into the round of 8, the defending series champion, a 3-time champion of the sport, all in this format, you let him in because you put on the damn Green Goblin mask again. Like, oh my God, Denny Hamlin, you're like Norman Osborn, my man. You're putting on the Green Goblin mask at the worst possible times. And inevitably, I feel like this is going to be your downfall, is being too greedy at Kansas. No one's saying that you can't race for a win. In fact, I think we all want that. But Chris Buescher and Kyle Larson managed to not completely wreck themselves in the exact same corner 3 years ago, but 3 races ago at Kansas. And you could manage to do that. I don't want to hear about your power steering. You were able to dive 2 lanes down in the corner and door slam Chase Elliott. So that clearly just doesn't hold a whole lot of weight to me. All that said, to get back to the question at hand, the 100% rule I think is inherently flawed, because if you're someone in Hamlin's situation, because we're going to get back to the reality of this, the best interest of your team is for you to not pass that car, because you do not want to face the 22 in the round of 8. But it goes against the idea that, like, if you have a faster car, you should be doing everything you can in your power to get ahead of the next car. But again, what happens when that speed doesn't equal help? It's just a really complicated situation. Obviously, you don't want stuff like last year at Martinsville, where you have an entire blockade of Chevys from all different teams protecting William Byron like he's, a basket and William Byron's baby Moses floating down the river. Like, you can't have that kind of stuff happening, because clearly that's not in the best interest of the sport. It's not in the best interest of competition. But you also can't really allow for things like Denny Hamlin, poking around with 10-lap fresher tires with Ross Chastain, because he doesn't want somebody else advancing into the playoffs. So the 100% rule, I feel like, just isn't, crafted very well. So, you get into this kind of situation where Denny is like, man, I didn't really want to pass him, but, obviously you have last week where he's talking about, I have to go 100%, so I had to wreck my driver to go try to win this race. It's just really interesting that these drivers are always willing to go 100% when it's convenient for them, or at least they think it is. All that to say, I don't think Denny had I think Denny had a right to be upset in the situation. I think it would have been prudent for him to know what the situation was points-wise, and for his team to really drop the ball there is kind of inexcusable. That said, I think the 100% rule is completely overrated and needs to be rewritten in some way. But it's really just a way for NASCAR to completely absolve themselves of, making ball and strike calls like last year at Martinsville where there was clear race manipulation happening. They didn't want to call it that. So, obviously these are just more hijinks created by NASCAR's gimmicky playoff system. And this is just another piece of runoff from that. So I'm going to close with saying that, Denny Hamlin, you did this to yourself. And if Joey Logano beat you at Phoenix, you've got no one else to look at but the mirror, buddy.
For Denny Hamlin, it's just one of those deals where it's like, how interesting of all the drivers that could have slipped by into the round of 8. And I feel like I'm just surprised because I thought more drivers would be attuned of, hey, under this situation, this driver is going to advance the round of 8. I don't want that, or the round of 12. I feel like the best example of somebody doing that was, unfortunately, Joey Logano. He didn't want Matt Kenseth to get that win and advance next round at Kansas. Didn't give Kenseth the space, spun him around. Of course, we all know what happened at Martinsville a couple races later. But I'm just surprised at Denny Hamlin's comments. I was just like, to me, it doesn't make sense. The 100% rule, that's like when F1 said, there's no team orders. Well, good luck trying to enforce that. This is so hard to enforce. Only takes a code word or something like Alonso's faster you, or as some of us saw it during that second stage, Shane Van Gisbergen getting passed by Chastain. He's just taking care of his tires. Tanner.
Yeah, just wanted to add one thing here. We wouldn't have this 100% conversation if we just had a full season 36 race points format. Denny Hamlin would have just passed Ross Chastain and not thought a lick about it.
And that's the thing. We're introducing more rules to preserve what NASCAR would say the integrity of the playoffs, but the integrity of the playoffs and the sport as a whole. Oh, you can't. Well, that's another discussion. I'm pretty sure Grid Encore tomorrow. We have a lot to talk about that. I know we could keep going on about this topic, but at the end of the day, I know we got a couple of comments in this chat room from Denver. SVG is going to force the Cup field to right foot brake on road courses. Then I feel Austin Cindric will have the advantage next year when he will learn from SVG way and Adelaide later this year. Little stat from today was SVG's 90th win on a road course, street course, and Supercars Xfinity Cup Series. He's on target to being the first to reach 100 road courses somewhere in 2027 in sedan stock car racing. That is a very impressive stat. I mean, when you look at, the only way I could think of maybe something a little bit of equivalent is the British touring cars and touring cars in Europe. We don't follow those. We don't have those stats, but those are some interesting stats. And then, Ben, as you mentioned, it was towards the end of the show. It was 6:57 p.m. Eastern. They showed the clip of AJ Allmendinger. So about a full 2 minutes if they had a commercial break. So before the show went off the air. With that said, of course, there was a winner of this race. Let's talk about the winner of the race, Shane Van Gisbergen. This is his 5th consecutive win on a road course, a historic rookie season where 5 wins, but all on the road courses. Considering his background, that's not really a surprise with the Supercar Series. When you talk about his racing stats, besides Supercars and NASCAR, he has a podium, World Rally Championship, granted it was World Rally 2, still a podium in his first start there. He is getting better in the oval, Shane Van Gisbergen. There's no doubt about that. We saw what he did last race weekend. So, Tanner, in 2026, what should the expectations be for Shane Van Gisbergen and his Trackhouse team?
Run it back. Obviously, that's easier said than done, but I think that they clearly have a monstrous advantage over the competition in just his rookie season in the NASCAR Cup Series at road courses. To kind of tag on, Denver's comment, obviously, these drivers don't operate the car the same way that he does. They have, a different language they've learned growing up in stock car racing to, use both feet. Whereas Shane was more accustomed to, using his right foot to brake, and I'm assuming using his left foot to, get into the clutch. With that said, I think that he obviously has made significant strides on the ovals. I've been saying that all year. In fact, last week, everybody, I was in person. I was in attendance at Kansas Speedway when Shane Van Gisbergen got his very first NASCAR Cup Series oval top 10. Isn't that amazing? I think that he needs to at least double that number next year. I would like to see him at least triple, maybe quadruple it. Like you gotta be a bit more active in these cup races on ovals if you want to have a chance at the championship, especially if the format does end up having some sort of a grand change coming in some way, shape, or form. Because I'm pretty sure we're not, despite today's antics, I highly doubt we are going back to this exact same format next year. So if SVG wants to become a true contender in the NASCAR Cup Series as soon as next year, he's got to make significant strides on the ovals. That means Trackhouse as a whole needs to get stronger, which could happen with Connor Zilic on the way, taking up that third car. But at the same time, I just think that a bit more of a reasonable expectation is that they win like 4 of the 6 or 4 of the 5 road course races. I guess I don't know exactly how many it is next year, but if they can win a majority of those races, as well as, show significant improvements on the ovals, and by that I mean I need to see him getting more consistent, like top 15s. I need to see him get some stage points on some ovals. I need to see him, show signs of life, because, I mean, the rookie season, I think that he's shown a pretty good gradual progression to being a mid-pack driver most of the time at ovals, sometimes just completely missing the setup, but those usually do correspond with Trackhouse as a whole missing the setup as a team. So with all that said, SVG, it's been a fantastic 2025. 5 wins in 31 starts is very, very impressive. Unfortunately, those are all of the top 5s that he has this season. Like I said, I want to see him get closer to making it to like 4 or 5 oval top 5s in addition to his road course exploits. I think that would be an encouraging sign to see him maybe round into a full-blown stock car racer and become a true championship contender in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I think exactly what Tanner said, run it back. I truly believe Trackhouse, even though I guess you would say they're a second-tier Chevrolet team, obviously Hendrick Motorsports, and then I guess some people want to throw Inspire there, but I wouldn't say those two are even close. But with Shane and Trackhouse, especially Ross Chastain too, I expect them to win, especially just because of the road courses, 5-6 races a year. I mean, why not? You have Shane Van Gisbergen, who won the last 5 and then obviously didn't win at COTA. So I was wrong on the pre-race. I said the Roval was his kryptonite. It was the only road course where he hadn't won at that's on the schedule. Forgot that he did not win at COTA in Xfinity, where he was close, and then he got that penalty. I believe he jumped from like 2nd to 27th his rookie year in that race. And then Zilic won this year, and he wasn't in that race, obviously, in Xfinity. But yeah, I expect if Trackhouse doesn't win at least 4 races next year, it'd be a bad year. And I know that sounds a lot because they're truly, I think you can compare them a lot to 2311 in that sense, where they came in around the same time, both went from 1 car to 2 cars to 3 cars. But it's almost like Trackhouse looks a lot better, and it's only because of Shane Van Gisbergen. I think also because Riley Herbst doesn't really help 2311 out at all. But when they were so evenly matched with Reddick and Chastain and then Bubba and Suarez in terms of just the performance over the couple of years with the organization. And now they have a lot more wins than 2311. And a lot of it's just Shane Van Gisbergen putting belt to butt every single time we make left and right turns in the sport. So, yeah, I truly believe they should win at least 4 or 5 races next season. And I know we're going to touch on Connor Zilic. Obviously, the kid's a unicorn. The kid, whatever mystical animal you can come up with, that's who Connor Zilic is. He's truly an incredible talent, one of the best generational talents we've ever seen in motorsports. And then even, I would argue, even in the Toyota camp of 2311, Heim's also got a lot of talent too. I don't know if he's as much as the unicorn yet, but they're both pretty damn good. That's all I'm going to say. But, yeah, I don't know if you expect him to go out and win at Zilic, but he does seem like he has an opportunity to add to that top 10 count, add to that top 5 count once they figure it out. It's going to obviously take some time. But, yeah, if Trackhouse doesn't win 4 or 5 races next season, it'd be disappointing, to be honest with you. And I know that's really weird to say about a second-tier team because obviously Keselowski made those comments about Hendrick, Penske, and Gibbs being top tier and really winning everything, just being above everyone with data and stuff like that. And there's not really a second-tier team that wins a lot of races except for Trackhouse Racing. So that'll be interesting to see how they do next season.
It's interesting with Shane Van Gisbergen. We see the slow improvements on the ovals, and going from a road course background to oval background, it's really hard stuff. We've seen drivers like Dario Franchitti, Danica Patrick, who, yes, IndyCar Series, especially before the merger, had a lot more ovals, like where Tony Stewart was. The Indy Racing League was solely ovals. I think that was why he had a less of a learning gap compared to Franchitti, some of the other IndyCar drivers, Montoya. Ground the road course, the ovals was just not exactly there. SVG has that same learning curve. The big thing is with this format, especially the winner you're in, it all of a sudden makes a lot of sense to, hey, get a driver that they're going to be good on those road courses, they're going to be dominant, get the 4 or 5 wins, have the quota worked out, and be up there. I mean, if he had gotten somehow through the first round, was in the second round, SVG in the round of 8, that would have been something where, my goodness, just the thought that Talladega's in that round could shake up everything. But that's all what ifs, because that's all hypotheticals. Let's look at another hypothetical, and of course that's going to be next year. With SVG being a 5-time winner on road courses, he's going to have a brand new teammate that is also good on road courses, won on ovals, and just set a record for most consecutive, I believe it was top 15 or top 10 finishes recently. Top 5? My goodness. I know Ben and Brandon, we talking a lot about him. Connor Zilic is coming over to Trackhouse Racing. So you're going to have Connor Zilic, who has 10 wins this year. You're going to have Ross Chastain, who has been to the championship before, has won a race on a road course, on an oval, on a super speedway too. And then you have Shane Van Gisbergen, granted 5 wins, all on the ovals. So I'd like to hear your thoughts, and encourage everyone in the chat room share your thoughts as well too. On paper, with Chastain, Van Gisbergen, and Zilic, could SVG be the weak link in 2026 for Trackhouse Racing?
I guess if you have to define weak link, right? Because Shane actually outscored Suarez this year. And I think all of us pretty much were like, yeah, Van Gisbergen might win a race or 2. I don't think maybe our fans from New Zealand and Australia knew he was going to win at least 5 races, but I think we all said maybe 1 or 2. But yeah, I don't know if the weak link, if he scored, yeah, so our very own Bet Schneider too. Yeah, 17 top 5s in a row for Zilic in Xfinity. Holy crap. In that car too, ever since he wrecked at the Texas, or Talladega, I'm sorry, Then Larson came in and won. So that car has like 18 straight top 5 finishes. The 88 car does, and it has like 11 wins total. So it's like, holy hell. But yeah,
Wrecked into the lead at Talladega on the last lap.
exactly. So it's like that kid is truly the best right now. But for them, it's like the weak link. I guess, do you find points? Do you find by wins? It's like kind of where do you go with that? But I think that's a lot of talent in that roster. And I truly think that if they had the top tier, like if they had the Hendrick Motorsports resources with Chastain, I think Chastain's got a lot of talent. I truly believe he is an incredible racer. He's one of those guys who would get in anything no matter what, and he's proved his worth in the sport. Obviously, he makes the silly moves like we were talking about, but he's got all the talent. And then you have a Connor Zilic who literally is, 19 years old? 18 or 19. I think he's 19. Like, holy heck, that kid has a future in literally any professional motorsport with 4 wheels if he wants one. That's how good he is. And I guess we're lucky that he chose NASCAR to go that route instead of trying to do IndyCar and trying to do supercars or something. It would be cool, though. I know Denver would love if he tried a supercars race, and I think he might probably still, especially with the Trackhouse connection. But yeah, I don't know if SVG would be the weak link because I think he'll win more than Chastain and Zilic. But if you're talking about oval top 10s, like Tanner said, or oval top 5s, I think he would be the weak link in that sense. But you never know. Maybe Zilic picks it up. Maybe Trackhouse really puts forth more effort into the whatever Zilic, if he's going to be in the 87, if he's going to be in the 99. I don't know obviously we don't know where Suarez is going. Obviously hearing rumors. I don't think anyone really knows at this point. But Zilic, I'm interested to know what number he's going to start his legacy with, whether it will be the 87 or the 99, or if they move Shane, which I don't think they would move Shane at this point out of the 88 because he's obviously won 5 races with it and then 1 with the 91. So, yeah, I don't know. Is it going to be a weak link? I think it's all up to your definition of weak link because you can argue Spire Motorsports, Justin Haley's a weak link, but McDowell and Hocevar are like really close on points. So it's all about perspective, I think, at the end of the day. So that's not really the best example, but with the Spire Motorsports comment, but yeah, I'll throw this over to Tanner. I'm interested to see what he has to say about Trackhouse Racing 2026.
I think any one of these 3 could be the weak link. And to kind of go off of what Matthew was saying, it really does boil down to perspective, and I also think it'll boil down to whatever the points format will look like next year. But I think if I had to bet which driver is going to have the best average finish, it's going to be Ross. If I had to guess who is going to have the most top 10s, it's probably going to be Ross. That said, I think that it'll be between Zilic and SVG. And I think, again, it'll really come down to how well Connor is able to adapt to the properties of the next-gen car aerodynamically. I think it's a little bit more easy to drive the Xfinity car and actually pass somebody than it is the Cup car at this point in time. And I think pretty much anybody that's hopped in a Cup car compared to the Xfinity car in the last even 5 years likely agree with you. With that said, I think that Zilic probably gets more top 10s holistically over SVG, but based on how we've seen rookies, even highly touted ones like Ty Gibbs come into the series and just not win right away. Tyler Reddick is another good example of a guy who went into a relatively decent situation at RCR, didn't win his first 2 years. This is not something that's entirely alien to us where, even the hottest of hot shots comes in and, still has a pretty respectable but humble rookie season. I mean, Jeff Gordon didn't win a race his rookie year. A lot of people like to forget that. So with all that said, I think that if Connor can adapt within the first 15 weeks to the next-gen car, I think it's entirely possible he wins a road course, maybe an oval if the cards fall right for him. I am very relieved to hear that he's not getting Matt Swiderski to be his crew chief. I have been vocally opposed to his control of the 99 team, and I think Randall Burnett has proven he is a far better option in that regard for Zilich's first season. So I think that this has been, obviously a lot of consideration paid to this. I think SVG at best has 12 top 10s next year total. And I think that Connor could eclipse that. It just depends really on what he's able to accomplish as far as adapting to the car and its properties. Obviously, he did very well at COTA earlier this year when there was a bit more of an even chance, I would say. But we don't know if that's going to translate, especially now that they'll be running 3 cars instead of 4 in a race that he's involved in. So it'll be between Zilich and SVG, but I think SVG probably leads the team in wins regardless. And Chastain may be in a spot where he hasn't won a race all regular season because, frankly, I don't think the Chevy platform is going to be much better next year, given that it'll be year 5 of this Camaro body. So all that to say, I think it's far too early to say that SVG is going to be a weak link of any kind. I do think, obviously, he's got a long way to go with ovals, but at the same time, he's still going to be that guy to beat at every single road course we go to outside of COTA. And even then, I bet if he had a second crack at it this time of year with all the experience that he's gained, he'd probably go out there and put a licking on him like he did the other 5 races that he's won.
When it comes to the road courses, I think SVG has to be easily the favorite. The only thing I wonder is if Connor Zillers, particularly Watkins Glen, if he's a strong contender for the win, if he could go up there. A win on the road course will be, in my opinion, a win taken away from SVG. The ovals is where he's really going to have to improve. I don't really see a weak link, but if an event, for some reason, SVG does not get the kind of wins we see at the road courses, I think that's not going to be seen so much as a weak link, but rather if it's from his teammate being a super rookie or just somebody else stepping up. Because that Trackhouse team, I think in general, doesn't feel like the top level Chevrolet team like Hendrick Motorsports, but I know they'll be working on that. Denver, SVG cracks the oval code, he'll be a monster and the Cup field will fear in the future. Yeah, that's the thing. If he figures this out, the ovals, wins in short ovals, the 1.5 mile, super speedways, that would just show the scalability of this driver to win on any type of racetrack, and that would be hard to beat. And really, I think at that point could be seen as a contender for the championship. Now, of course, results are official. We don't have a graphic yet, but there has been one change. This news broke right before we went on the air. Riley Herbst has been disqualified from the race results. So Riley Herbst,
heavens, no.
So Riley Herbst will be shown as 37th place. That puts him behind Austin Cindric, who was 36. Of course, Austin Cindric Day came to an early end when we saw Carson Hocevar do what Carson Hocevar does, and almost what Ross Chastain did, but just Hocevar had a lot less planned out. Cindric had to go behind the wall. Brad Keselowski, 35th. Kyle Busch, who lap 1, not even into turn 1, pushed into the wall, and this race was just ruined. So Riley Herbst disqualified. Not a good day for 2311, Matthew. One car disqualifying, and your other 2 are out of the playoffs. How does 2311 respond from this with Las Vegas, Talladega, we got Martinsville, and then Phoenix?
I guess they gotta hope something happens in the charter lawsuit so they can get that weird advantage that they seem to like. That not obviously not like advantage, but how we joke about on the shows where every time there was some big factor, it seems like they would come out and win. But yeah, I think they could win at all 3 tracks. Are they going to? No. Well, I mean, maybe not as much as Martinsville, but I definitely think Bubba and Reddick could win at Las Vegas. I think Riley Herbst could pull one out and win at Talladega. Not going to happen, but still could theoretically happen. And then Martinsville, I think Bubba has a better shot than Reddick does at that track. But I guess you just got to go out there and try to get a win, another one. I mean, you only have one this season. You could have had two, but your team owner decided not to allow that to happen, or not even allow, just really did not want that to happen, it seemed like. But Tyler Reddick, too, it's crazy how good he is, and he hasn't won yet this season. I think that's crazy to me. I think it is definitely the most shocking thing that Tyler Reddick has not won a race this season, but he still has a couple more chances. I think he can go out and win. I would say Vegas is another one. I would say he could probably win Phoenix too. He probably won't. He's won at Talladega before, so it's like, maybe he could do it. But yeah, 23-11. What a crappy couple weeks, 3 weeks for them as an organization, going from the highest of the high coming to the white flag to the absolute lowest at Kansas. And then prior to that, New Hampshire was a crap show for that organization too. And then even the week before, they just weren't that great. So it's just like they had, like, Bubba had all the momentum in the world, and then one or two things go wrong, and it goes like right out the door. And that's just the telltale of that organization this season. It seems like every time they get really have a high, it goes really, really low. Mainly the Reddick and Wallace. Riley Herbst, I mean, I don't know what more he could do worse. No offense to him, but he's 35th in points. Like, he's only ahead of Cody Ware in the standings. And he was closer to Noah Gragson, but Noah Gragson obviously made up a few points, even though he only finished like 28th or something today. So, yeah, if you're Riley Herbst, I don't know. Go to your home track and try to finish in the top 20 at Vegas, and then try to finish in the top 20 at Talladega. And I don't know where he's going to finish at Mark. So, nobody knows. But, yeah, it's one of those things for them. What a crappy ending to a year for that organization, where it seemed like they had all the high hopes, where Bubba and Reddick were running really great all season. Bubba got the Brick Red 400 win. Both guys had a real legitimate shot heading into the round of 12 to make the round of 8, and they crumbled. And it just happens. But, yeah, they got to regroup and now try to advance as much as you can from, I believe they're 9th and 10th now in the standings, Bubba and Reddick. So try to get up to 7th or 6th by the end of the year. So that's all they got to do. Other than that, you can't really do much, and just hope that December 1st goes well for you at this point.
I mean, yeah, the ultimate goal would probably be to get a win, maybe 2, before the end of the season. Obviously, I think anybody in the field could pull it off at Talladega. Vegas, both Wallace and Reddick have shown speed there in the past, and I don't even know why I bother bringing it up, but Riley Herbst got his very first Xfinity Series win there a couple years ago, so maybe he could show up and have a little bit of speed. Maybe. Probably not. And then obviously we have Martinsville, where Bubba ran 3rd in the spring race and has a very well-documented history of solid runs there. So obviously Reddick and Herbst won't be factors in that event, so doesn't even bear repeating bringing them up. And Phoenix, I mean, Reddick has had strength there sometimes in the past, mostly in the old car. Bubba has also had a fair share of strong runs there, but I just don't think that, based on their performance at New Hampshire, I'd be really giving them the vote of confidence at this moment in time on a good run there. And again, it really doesn't even matter to bring it up, but Riley Herbst did win his most recent Xfinity Series race there, at least as a full-time driver in the 2024 finale, because Justin Allgaier didn't go 100% in the final quarter and race it out with him because he knew he didn't need to win the title. Again, this is where the 100% rule gets a little tricky, those kinds of situations. So you add all that up, obviously getting a W would be great. As far as like schematically as a team, you need to make sure that you exist next year, one way or the other. I think that they intend to go to trial on December 1st, and let NASCAR and the France family have it. And to that, I say good luck. They're definitely going to fight like hell, as they have been throughout this lawsuit, even if it's looking like they're fighting backwards by including a number of owners' statements talking about how they want permanent charters, which is something the teams are fighting for. So, yeah, that was really confusing on Friday evening. All that said, 2311, I think, could be best explained as having great expectations in 2025 and just failing to execute when it matters most at the ownership level. And I'm not talking about Michael Jordan or Curtis Polk. I'm talking about the driver of the 11 car. He completely unwound their season by wrecking his driver at Kansas for genuinely no good reason. And he's got no one, again, to look at but himself if Joey Logano manages to advance here in this round. So, yeah, all-around disappointing season for the team that won the regular season title and, landed themselves in the championship 4 in spectacular fashion at Homestead last season, have obviously offered up their fair share of great moments for the sport already, and they're only in year 5. Obviously, Bubba getting the Brickyard this year, but 1 win as a team, should have been 2. It's just an unfortunate end for what looked to be a promising campaign at the start of the year.
Yeah, it looked like it was going to be a promising year. I mean, to go from regular season championship 4 contender and to be winless, that is something else where it's just, granted, we know there's a lot going on with 2311. I mean, we know as well it was made public about the battle they got, what's on their mind with what rookies their son is going through. That's not an easy thing for any parent to do what they need to do at work without that distraction. So a lot just not working out for them. For 2311 in general, be interested to see what kind of moves are made into off season, especially with the trial. What happens with Riley Herbst, who's been struggling. I mean, there was at one point Riley Herbst was ahead of Shane Van Gisbergen in the standings way early in the season. I think we were still 5 races in, and became, what if Shane Van Gisbergen doesn't get that win at the road course? Well, that's been blown out of the water, and SVG now overall, I think, has essentially in the bag. The NASCAR playoffs itself, top 4, Hamlin, Blaney, Larson, and Byron. Your bottom 4, Bell, Briscoe, Elliott, and Logano. Logano, the bottom. But we know how dangerous he is. He showed it in Las Vegas last year. All of them have won races this year. You got 3 Toyotas, 3 Chevrolets, 2 Fords. Las Vegas, 1.5 mile oval, Talladega, the biggest wild card, the super speedway, and then Martinsville has been plenty chaotic when you put that racetrack as a cutoff to then determine who will be in the championship 4. So Tanner, how important is Las Vegas for all the teams next race weekend?
I mean, obviously, if you're one of those 8, you want to punch your ticket to the championship 4 super early and win that first race so you do not have to tackle Talladega, because you don't want to have to be going point racing at Talladega, especially in the round of 8. Obviously, you could go in there, you might win one stage, and then you might finish 21st in the next one. It's a complete crapshoot who's going to actually compete, who's going to actually go out and win. So you don't really have a terrible control of your own destiny like you used to be able to in these kinds of races. With that said, obviously you've got Martinsville, where I think we've seen a better quality of racing there since the 2023 fall race, where there was clearly tire degradation. The concrete on the inside of the corners was properly chewing tires up throughout the 2023 fall event, as well as the 24 fall event. The 23 spring race, I think, ended up being like just a little too cold, or a little too warm, probably, not allowing the or it was activating the concrete too much and not taking in, a terrible amount of rubber. With all that said, I think that if you're any of these 8 teams, you should try to do whatever you can to win this race. But the second thing you should do is do everything you can to not allow Joey Logano to have this race fall right into his hands. I think that they are easily the scariest team this round because theoretically they could be strong at all 3 tracks. I mean, Logano is one of the more winning drivers at Las Vegas throughout his career, especially with the 22 team. I think that this is obviously where he punched his ticket in the first year of the next gen era in his race against Ross Chastain at Vegas. And I think that this will be a spot that he really wants to, capitalize so he, again, doesn't have to worry about Talladega, because Talladega looked to have been his undoing last year, leading up towards the front there at the end and then getting wiped out in the biggest one. So, yeah, I just think that if you're in this round of 8, you're in this semifinal race, you should definitely be trying to maximize Las Vegas as much as possible and bring your best possible piece. It's going to be your last intermediate of the year, so you may as well, again, exhaust all the resources you can to make sure you have the fastest car possible. But, yeah, I definitely not excited if you're one of those 8 or one of the 7 that aren't Joey Logano, because Joey Logano clearly, as we've seen by the cut line here, has nothing to lose by just absolutely laying it out on the line with Paul Wolfe calling, incredible strategies in the box that somehow managed to get them to the end. But I think one thing that'll be important is if, Logano has like a teammate helping him like he did last year, because had it not been for Ryan Blaney, Joey Logano probably doesn't even make it out of the round of 16, let alone the round of 8 and into the title race where he ended up winning the whole thing. So all that to say that this round will certainly offer up a heap and helping of gimmickry that we haven't seen in quite some time. And frankly, I hope this is the last time we have to talk about the playoffs and Talladega being involved in them.
Yeah, the Las Vegas is, you would argue, probably the most important race of the final or second to last round, the round of 8. The reason why I say that is you might say Martinsville, right? Last ditch effort. But a lot of the time, whoever does really well at that first race in the round of 8, obviously, I think Logano's won at least 2 or the 3 in his career of that first race in the round of 8 that went on to win the championship. So it is very important that you have those extra weeks to prepare for the championship race. Like Corey Himes, obviously, I believe just locked himself into the championship 4, if I'm not mistaken, in trucks, even though he's got like 17 months until that final race, because it's like, I don't understand. The truck series schedule is absurd. I remember, was it Ty Majeski a couple years ago had to wait like over a full month before the championship race, even though he clinched. It's silly.
He clinched at Bristol.
Yeah, it's just insane to me how that works. But yeah, Las Vegas is really important. And what I really do like about this round of 8 is I would argue that probably all 8 of these drivers could win at any of these tracks. I mean, sure, you say Larson hasn't won on a super speedway or Briscoe hasn't won on a super speedway, but they're contenders. A lot of the time, they have multiple top 5s at these tracks. Larson, in more recent memory, because usually he used to get crap because that was the only thing he couldn't do, and then he's gotten multiple top 5s, I think even this season on super speedway. So for all 4 of those guys, Hamlin, Blaney, Larson, Byron, Bell, Briscoe, Elliott, and Logano, have a legitimate shot, at least all of them really, to win one of these 3 races and make that. I think we will see personally one guy get in on points and the other 3 are going to get on wins for this final round. I don't know who it's going to be, but then you look at like the intermediates. Hamlin's been fast. Earlier in the season, you could argue Hendrick with Larson and Byron were fast. But then when you go anywhere, Blaney's always fast. So he's probably going to be one of those guys. And then Bell as well was fast earlier this season, these tracks. So It's very important. Las Vegas is very important. I love the idea, and I will always die on the hill that I love the idea of an intermediate being the opening race of a round. I just think it brings the best racing in this car, and it kind of shows there's a little more excitement. I hate the idea of Talladega in the playoffs. I hate the idea of any super speedway remotely close to the playoffs. I don't like the season finale being a super speedway either, because we almost had a Cole Custer in the playoffs. But luckily enough for the system to save the system in that sense, Ryan Blaney won that race. But yeah, it's very important. I think we're going to be having this conversation whether it's Monday or that Sunday night. I know it's a night race. If Joey Logano somehow wins this race, I think it's just – I don't even know how we will have a show because it's just like – it seems like you can't say he doesn't deserve it, but he's been the worst of those 8 all year. Last year, if winning in didn't exist, he wouldn't have even made the playoffs because he was like 16th or 7th. I think he was 17th in the standings behind Kyle Busch without the win. So if he goes on to win a championship this year, doing this again, I know he had a way better year this year than last year, but it's like, damn, it's like they got to figure that out. But shout out Joey Logano, obviously, when his back is against the wall, he figures it out. Paul Wolf is top 3, top 5 in the business at making these calls, and clearly he made a great call to bring Logano to pit road with however many, I think was it like 12 laps ago today. But yeah, it's very important. Interested to see. I truly believe that all 8 of these guys remaining can win these next 3 races. I would argue some of the other playoff guys, like this past round, you probably weren't going to see certain guys win at the Roval, certain guys win, obviously, at Kansas, so on and so forth. But these next 3 tracks are like pretty good for all these drivers. So very, very interesting to see. It's going to be a fun intermediate race. It is the last intermediate, I believe, of the season because Phoenix is technically a short track. So very excited. Sorry for yapping, but yeah, looking forward to Vegas. Not looking forward to writing a story really late at night, but so.
Away it goes. It'll be interesting to see what happens on Las Vegas this weekend. Of course, we will preview and recap it all right here on the Grid Network. Subscribe, hit that bell icon. Now, before we switch over to Formula One, Master, we're going to let you go. What is your Grid One shining moment?
Absolutely. Definitely not that F1 race I know you guys are going to talk about. But, but I would say Trackhouse Racing and Red Bull, specifically Zilich and Shane Van Gisbergen, sweeping the road courses in Cup and Xfinity again this season. That's really my one shining moment of the race weekend. And then also, yeah, that's really all I got. I'm interested to hear what you guys have with F1 and MotoGP as I update my story after Riley Herbst gets disqualified. So I got to go back in there and do some things with it before you guys see it on gridnetworktv.com. But yeah, SVG, Zilich, and then even Corey Heim, both Zilich and Heim winning 10 races this year. One shining moment for the full weekend.
It'll be interesting to see everyone's one shining moment. Encourage everyone to chat and share your shining moment. And scan the QR code to go to the Grid Network TV.com website to read Matthew Burrow's article once it's posted, and you can see past articles, including the history of the Grid Endurance Performance Index, which will be updated on Wednesday, and the Grid Ranking as well. Now we'll bring Kobe in. Tanner, we'll go ahead and get started in recapping Formula One and Formula One's big under the lights event at Singapore.
Indeed. Thanks, Joe. The Singapore Grand Prix kicked off this morning, and obviously we saw plenty of excitement on lap 1. Then, unfortunately, a rather uneventful race up front as George Russell, the pole sitter, pulled away with no challenge from the competition and took the win. Max Verstappen came home in second, and a surprise in third place on the bronze medal of the podium, Lando Norris. Oscar Piastri finished fourth after contact with Norris, and his lead in the championship was cut down to 21 points. Verstappen also managed to gain a smooth 6 points on Piastri as well. Oscar obviously wanted a position swap after the contact between him and Lando on the first lap, but no order swap was given. And again, Papaya rules make a mock of the championship. So, Kobe, starting with you, did McLaren make the right call to not swap their drivers, and is it now race and no fair play?
So well, Tanner, looking at this situation, the way that I saw it, it was just unfortunate contact between the McLaren teammates here, and in the last few races, it seems like Oscar's gotten a little whiny on the radio. I don't know if anybody else has noticed this, but it's been really strange the last couple of Grand Prix races for Oscar Piastri, as it seems like the pressure is really starting to get to him, because most of the season he's been as cool as a cucumber and nothing seems to faze him. But now we're finally starting to see some cracks from Oscar Piastri, so I guess he's not 10 foot tall and bulletproof like I thought he was early on in the season. But honestly, just because your teammate ran into you, I get that's not good at all when two teammates make contact like that. But after watching the replay several times, that was quite a hit to the side of Oscar Piastri there. But both of them were able to continue, no issues at all after that. So I thought all should have been fine after that. I didn't really think that a swap was necessary there. It'd be like, oh, Lando hit you, we should swap us, just as like saying sorry for what Lando did to you. I didn't think that was necessary. I saw it as just an unfortunate racing incident there, and hopefully once they sit down with both drivers, they're able to move on from this situation. And I know everyone's been talking about the post-race scene, because McLaren end up clinching the constructors, and they were really excited about that. And then we saw the celebrations, and Oscar Piastri was not a part of those celebrations, and people were wondering, is that like Oscar protesting and because of the papaya rules and all of that? But in reality, Oscar was just fulfilling, the obligation, was just fulfilling, some media obligations, according to an ESPN article I was reading before it went on the air. So he had to be in that place, while Lando was over there with the rest of the team. So it was just, Oscar had to fulfill those F1 obligations first. So it turns out that there was nothing there in this situation. But just to bring it all back, really, really hate to see this happen again. And we're going to continue to talk about these papaya racing rules.
The papaya rules is one of those deals where I feel, I get it. When the contracts are made, there's a certain response to, okay, there's going to be no number one driver. We know Oscar Piastri has Mark Webber in his corner, and Mark Webber does not want Oscar Piastri to become a number two driver based on his experience with what happened with Red Bull. Oscar Piastri started this season where people were comparing him to the Iceman. Cold, calm, calculated. And yes, papaya rules occasionally were there where we saw the swap for position, and he just did his thing, kept moving on. But the last 2 weeks, like you said, I feel like we're over in Baku, he crashed out early, made that mistake, qualifying didn't do good, and then we saw what happened today. Better qualifying effort. Lando Norris, great start. Hard racing, it just happened to be that was the contact between him and his teammate. I get he was frustrated, but I just don't see it where that's going to be let's swap the positions back. If anything, I think it's now to the point where the McLaren team has to say, look, we are not going to do any of this swap position back, try to treat you all fair. It's going to come down to when you qualify. If Lando Norris is ahead of Oscar Piastri by up 2, maybe even 3 positions, expect Lando Norris to get that preferred strategy. If it just doesn't work out where a pit stop goes long because of a mishap and Oscar Piastri takes the lead, that's just racing, folks. You got to move on. I mean, it's unfortunate, but that's racing. How many times have we seen other times teammates? I could think of when it was Sergio Perez. It seemed like while Max Verstappen had the nice flawless pit stop, a mistake here or there, Perez lost 1 or 2 spots. This is just the nature of the beast. I think the best thing they could do right now is just say, look, you're going to go out there, you're going to race. We hope the two of you race each other cleanly. We hope the two of you don't make the number one rule, and that is make contact with your teammate and you crash each other out. That's the number one rule we don't want to see broken. But you're just going to race, and whatever happens, the two drivers, they have to put it out there on the line. They're not going to step in. They're not going to intervene. I think that'd be the best thing for McLaren to do is say, we're not intervening.
Couldn't agree more, Joe. Obviously, I feel that McLaren's handling of this championship battle throughout the season, because it's clearly been a 2-horse race between the two papaya-colored cars, has been a bit bumpy, so to speak. And you'd really like to see a team that is clearly trying to mount its charge back to prominence, handle it with a little bit more deft and tact, but I feel like they again and again make puzzling decision after puzzling decision. So I guess we'll see how that plays out over these last 6 races. But back to this particular race in Singapore. This race was introduced as the first night race on the F1 calendar many years ago, and unfortunately it's best remembered now for the Renault Spingate mess back in 2008, I believe. The dramatic start crash under wet conditions took both Ferraris and Max Verstappen out of contention, but really the race itself had almost no action unless there were some form of mistakes, whether it be on pit road or on track, and safety cars. So, of course, it is a spectacle to have F1 in downtown Singapore, the pinnacle of motor racing under the lights. It's one of the longest and most physically demanding tracks as well, especially for street courses. Joe, I'm going to kick this one over to you. Should the track itself be revised to allow for more overtaking?
If possible, I think they should look into it. I know it's already been revised once, particularly they removed a section where the cars for one point went under the grandstands, came on the outside, then went back under. This is where the spin gate mess occurred. That section is gone. But it's still one of the longest tracks, one of the most physical demanded tracks. It just doesn't present that much passing opportunities. Granted, you're limited to the streets of Singapore. I see nothing wrong if they were to say, hey, what if we shorten the track, whether it's lengthwise, area-wise, where it has a smaller footprint, but hopefully find some areas of longer straights, some hairpins, to make it where we can see a little bit more passing. Because when it comes to DRS, it's very limited here. With these cars, it makes it harder. Remember, this track came in with the prior generation of cars, not this current one. It is a spectacle, seeing the skyline under the lights, racing under the dark. I mean, I still remember the hype that first year when F1 was going to race for the first time in nighttime conditions. I still feel like that's sort of the big draw. This is a night race. This is Singapore. I don't think people are going to be less excited for Singapore if it's a brand new circuit layout. That's going to be shorter. Hopefully allow some more passing opportunities, because even with the pit stops, it's such a long lap. You really are not seeing that much change in position unless you have drastically big mistakes. So I think a revised track will bring new light. That was just interesting how it worked out because we run under lights, but just bring a new set of ways where the drivers could say, hey, this is a passing opportunity. This is an opportunity where strategy could take a bigger role. Pit stops could matter even more. Because at the end of the day, it just felt like one of the, I hate to say, those early 2000s, late 90s F1 races where it just felt more like a procession. First lap's over, Schumacher has the lead. You know he's going to win the race unless something catastrophically goes wrong if weather shows up. This race just sort of felt that way after the first couple of laps. You need a mistake by somebody to see a drastic change, and we just did not see that. Besides, I believe Gabriel Borratello making contact and having to replace his wing. The rest of the race was almost a procession.
Not really much to talk about from this race. If it wasn't for Piastri and Norris colliding, we would literally have nothing to talk about tonight in regards to Formula One. Show you how boring this event was, unfortunately. But like you mentioned, Joe, they recently revised this track just a few years ago, but it doesn't seem like those revisions have done hardly much of anything to help the on-track product. And I guess they can always look at it, but I'm not really sure what more you can do, given what you have to work with right now on the streets of Singapore. And it doesn't look like Singapore is going to be going off the F1 calendar anytime soon. So I guess the only thing that we can hope for is that when we get the new regulations come in, that this will turn into a track that produces good racing. And a lot of the, issues with the on-track product has to do with the cars themselves. And if this next car in the F1 regulations can produce some good racing, maybe Singapore will be one of the tracks where it does well at, while at others it will falter. But in regards to revising the track, I don't really see what more they could potentially do to turn this into a track that produces exciting racing.
Personally, I think that maybe they should contact the people that work over at Nintendo and ask them about how they made the Singapore course in Mario Kart 8. Maybe they'll get some ideas. With that said, though, it is certainly a complex problem. I do feel that making modifications to a street course does tend to be a lot easier than making a reprofile to a obviously fixed course with, existing seating and things like that. But it's still, you still have to get all the proper permits and clearances to make all that happen, to run the race as you would like. And that isn't always easy. So it's certainly an uphill battle for Formula One as a whole and the sanctioning body to, make an engaging layout in a market that they desperately want to continue to serve. So it'll be interesting to see how they take it going forward. But enough of that very mediocre F1 race, and we'll move on to my shining moment for the week. And obviously, Matthew kind of touched on it, but I don't think enough can be said about Corey Haim's Truck Series performance from this past week. I think that he put on an absolute show, making his way back through the field after sustaining damage in a turn one, lap one incident that was completely not of his doing. I think that the Tricon Garage team showed a lot of resolve in making sure that their driver, had a very comfortable race truck to pilot through the field. And ultimately, it seemed like he passed every car that stood in his wake outside of Brent Cruz. And unfortunately for Cruz, a late race restart due to a Tony Breidinger caution ultimately allowed for Haim to get ahead and ultimately retain it to keep his insane run that he's been on alive. I mean, 10 wins in a Truck Series campaign when they normally run between 25 or 23 and 26 races in a season. It's obviously simply unparalleled in history in the 30 years that the Truck Series has been active. So, yeah, I don't think enough can be said about Corey Haim and what he's able to do in the NASCAR Truck Series, but hopefully over time he will manage to make his way into a Sunday driver, even though he clearly has the talent to do it now and lights the world on fire like we all expect him to do. The kid is clearly an exceptional talent, and honestly, it's a shame that he hasn't gotten a cup opportunity to this point.
Yeah. With that said, Tanner, we'll let you go for tonight. Thank you for being here, sharing your insights in F1 and NASCAR, and also want to encourage everyone to please visit gridnetworktv.com to check out your amazing article that you published earlier in the week, The Champions Prelude, the start of a new series looking at Matt Kenseth's 2002 season, which led to him winning the title the very next year. And once again, thank you, Tanner. And we'll move on to MotoGP, where the Indonesian Grand Prix will be remembered for two things: a rookie race winner and the second youngest winner in MotoGP history, and the unfortunate accident between Marco Bezzecchi and the 2025 MotoGP world champion Marc Marquez. Let's start with the lap one incident where Bezzecchi had the pole, got off to a terrible start, and fell to ninth. But as he tried to work his way up to the front, he made a controversial move to the inside of Marc Marquez that took him down. Both went into the gravel, and Marquez suffered a collarbone injury. And Bezzecchi apologized for the incident, took fault, and is expected to receive a penalty. And one thing on Marquez's collarbone injury that he suffered, Joe, that's all they called it for now. I went back and checked. He hasn't officially been diagnosed with a broken collarbone yet, but that's what they believe that it is. But, once we have the official word, I'm sure we'll talk about it a little bit on Wednesday's Grid Tonight show. So, Joe, after seeing the incident between Bezzecchi and Marquez, do you think a penalty for him was the right call? Because to me, it looked like he drove right through Mark.
Yeah, I have to say a penalty, that's easily coming. Just because when you look at that corner, it was two right-hand corners, and they were a quick succession. So getting on the inside as your riders are leaning, you're really pushing it. And he just was a little too far back, made contact with that right wheel. Next thing you know, they're both heading towards the gravel pit. I mean, Marc Bezzecchi has said online he made a mistake. He apologized to the Marc Marquez team over at Ducati. I get it. You had a horrible start from pole. You really want to show what you could do without Aprilia and just pushing it. But it's just those kind of mistakes, and it's just unfortunate, just the nature of MotoGP, motorcycle racing. Contact, I mean, we talk about how contact with open-wheel cars is dangerous because wheel-to-wheel contact, someone's going airborne. In this case, you and another rider are going off the bike. I was relieved that Marc Marquez, because we all remember how the 2021 injury occurred. He fell off the bike and was the spinning back wheel that hit him, and that really resulted in a major injury. I was concerned like we were going to see a repeat, whether it was Bezzecchi's bike or Marc Marquez's bike, the wheel making contact with him. Thankfully, that didn't happen, but just tumbling over the gravel. I get it, you want that gravel there because it'll help slow it down, stop it all. But it is such a hard impact on the body just taking those shots. Just tough break to see Marc Marquez injured, and it just crazy to me, Cody. That a week ago we were all celebrating comeback complete for what he's been through, and now another injury, not even 7 days later.
Yeah, really unfortunate with Marc Marquez, especially knowing what he went through to get back, 5 years later to reach his championship. And thankfully, that it's just a collarbone injury, because it could have been much worse, right? It could have been another injury, similar to what he had before. And then who knows if he would be able to come back from something like that for a second time. But if it's a collarbone, as we've seen, with others in the past, straightforward surgery to get that fixed, and then just a little healing, and then you should be good to go moving forward. And Mark said that he was sad to be injured after locking up the championship. And of course, we all know how Connor Zilic recently suffered a broken collarbone after a scary fall in victory lane at Watkins Glen. And after his injury and surgery, Zilic had a week off, with Xfinity not having a race. And then the following week, he started the race at Daytona and had Parker Kligerman finish the race. And then after that, won at Portland International Raceway, but still felt discomfort from the surgery. And now he seems to be back at 100%, not slowing down at all. And MotoGP only has 4 race weekends left, 8 total, counting the sprints. And Marc Marquez, when you look at it, he's wrapped up the championship, so there's really nothing for him to race for, so to speak, besides, I guess, collecting his weekly paycheck. So do you think it would be in Marc Marquez's best interest just to skip out on the last few race weekends of the season since the title's locked up and just focus on getting healthy for 2026?
I hate to say it, Kobe, but I think it is in the best interest of Marc Marquez. Sit out for the rest of the season. Focus on 2026. You got the championship wrapped up. You have had one of the most dominant seasons in this era of MotoGP when it comes to the sprint race Grand Prix format. I hate to say that's good enough, but considering that what you've been through, well, we saw Jorge Martin go through this year. Just the risk of MotoGP in general. The fact that you're not just running a Grand Prix race, one race, you're running 2 races. That's sprint race. Yeah, it might be shorter distance, but that still takes a physical toll on everyone. From arm pump surgeries that are required to the injuries that are sustained from a crash. This era of MotoGP is just so physical, so demanding. You get the opportunity to say, hey, I'm in a good spot where I could go ahead, take the rest of the season, recover, and come back in 2026 to defend my title against hopefully a healthy Jorge Martin, against a healthy group of riders from the Gresini team, which they got a 1-3 finish today. Pecco Bagnaia, if he could rebuild that confidence, show he's there. He wasn't there this weekend. And maybe if Yamaha and Honda have something together, I mean, heck, Pedro Acosta in the KTM still showing some potential. I think there's a lot of reasons it's best interest for Marc Marquez to sit out for the last 4 races. It's tough because you just know there's going to be fans at Phillip Island, the next race in Australia, that are going to go there. They want to see Marc Marquez, if that's their favorite rider, go out there, get the race win, race for the win. But he's not going to likely be there. I think it's just in the best interest that, hey, it's a tough break. If anything, maybe, I got to be honest, revisit the sprint race format idea, because at the end of the day, you're doubling the race loads from 20 races a year, which we used to have between 18 to 19 races, to now essentially almost works out to 42 races. Yes, the sprint races are shorter, but it's just as intense because every single point mattered. We saw that last year with Jorge Martin, Pecco Bagnaia. Marc Marquez was just so dominant, where he had, I believe, 10 weekend sweeps. Game over. Well, it's unfortunate he's injured, but he doesn't need to be out there no more, and I think that's the best thing he could do.
Yeah, I agree full-heartedly with you, Joe. I think Marc Marquez's best interest would be to sit out the rest of the season, because there's nothing more to gain in this season. I think he's had a fantastic historic season, and he can just put a bow on it and say, look what I did this year. I can go home, enjoy the holiday season with my family. Heal up and come back stronger next year, because it doesn't really make any sense for him to be out there, risking more injury when he's already has his championship battle wrapped up. And you also mentioned Jorge Martin as well, Joe. He suffered his own broken collarbone and what's been an injury plague season for him, which started in preseason testing. So Jorge Martin's been injured all year long, and he keeps rushing back. It hasn't worked out for him. So hopefully, Jorge will listen to medical advice and come back when he's fully healed. And Marc Marquez, after everything he went through trying to come back from his arm injuries, a few times, I'm sure he's learned his lesson about waiting as well. So I would not be surprised. I would not be surprised if we don't see Marc Marquez riding a bike in MotoGP for the rest of this calendar year. But who really knows? He's a competitor. He wants to be out there, so maybe he'll want to come back. Just for the love of racing. But sometimes you have to put your love for racing on the back seat and focus on what really matters, and that's getting healthy. And you mentioned him, Joe. Marquez's Ducati factory teammate Pecco Bagnaia was missing in action all weekend long due to poor performance. Even the announcers seemed to be surprised how poorly Pecco was performing, because remember watching him in the sprint race in the Grand Prix, he was like in last place, running way back there with everyone else. It reminded me of Kyle Busch's final race as a Joe Gibbs racing driver at Martinsville Speedway, when he literally ran outside the top 30 all race long on pace and showed absolutely nothing. So I was getting those vibes from Pecco Bagnaia, wondering why he's so much slower compared to everyone else. It just shows you how, 1 week in this sport you can be a hero like he was in Japan, and then zero the next week in Indonesia. This sport will really humble you quickly, as it did like Pecco Bagnaia. But the person we're going to really talk about is Fermin Aldegar, teammate of Alex Marquez, who took his first career MotoGP win. And Joe, as I told you in the private chat yesterday, I don't think we've ever mentioned Fermin Aldegar's name ever on our Grid Network programs, and he's 20 years old and became the second youngest winner behind Marc Marquez, the youngest winner in MotoGP history. In August 2024, it was announced that he would join Gresini Racing despite not winning a championship in Moto2 and Moto3, but now he has a win in MotoGP. And when you look at his results this year, only 5 teams did not score points in the Grand Prix. Now 8th in the rider standings, 3 podiums, a 3rd, a 2nd, and now a win. So, Joe, what does the future hold for Fermin Aldegar, in your opinion?
I'm thinking it's looking pretty bright. Like, we never really talked about him, and just seeing his experience Moto2, Moto3, it was just, when they made this announcement, I couldn't help but think, it was like, okay, is there sponsorship money involved? Because we know a lot of times your key to the next step is sponsorship. Gresini Racing being an independent team, yes, they get a alliance with Ducati, which is the best bikes right now on the grid. That has to look good, and all season long, he has just been quiet, but still, 1 podium, a 3rd place. Hey, that's a good run. Still quiet most of the way. Then another podium. Still just not really capturing attention. But you know what? I think that's nothing wrong with that, because it sort of reminds me of Pedro Acosta, his first year when he was with Gas. Rookie season, impressing everybody, making the big moves, showing what he could do. And now look where he is, with the factory KTM team. The KTM bikes are just not at that level. That's why I think he's still winless. In this case, what we're seeing from Alligator, I think it's just, in the sense, almost the opposite. Just very quiet, under the radar, putting together these results. And then when everything clicks, he's up there for a podium. It happened twice, but then this weekend, it worked out to even better. He's going up there for the win. What a battle between him and Pedro Acosta, getting around, getting the lead, and just pulling away, building that lead up to where he could not be catched. If he could continue doing that, I think he's going to be a threat for a lot more race wins. He has this 2-year contract with Gresini. I would not be surprised if he enters the rumor mill next year, if he has a good, decent season and is talked about maybe a potential replacement in the factory team, because Pecco Bagnaia, where were you this weekend? Just nothing. After the week before, we were talking about Pecco Bagnaia. He is back. Can he do this? Well, he couldn't this weekend. But for Alligator, I just think this is a big opportunity for him, Cody, to show, you give me the right bike, you give me the right equipment, I can make results happen. I can go out there, get some wins. And if for some reason Ducati don't pick him up, Yamaha might look at him. I mean, Alex Rins, he had a strong run at one point, was contending for a podium, but then those soft tires failed him. He fell back. I mean, they could easily replace him. You look at KTM, Brad Binder, hasn't really done much lately and just seems to not be at that level at Pedro Acosta. That could be another switch. And then Honda. I mean, they're slowly improving. Juan Mir, Luca Marini. Let's see how their seasons go. I think there's plenty of opportunities there, and it's not just with the Ducati factory team. I think the other factory teams are looking at him.
Yeah, it would not surprise me if Fernando Aldegar ends up getting a better seat in MotoGP in the future. I remember last year we kept calling Pedro Acosta the super rookie, but Fernando Aldegar, he did something that Pedro Acosta wasn't able to do his rookie year, which is, to stand on the top step of the podium in a MotoGP Grand Prix. So you got to tip your hat to Fernando for what he was able to accomplish this weekend, and looking forward to seeing what can happen in the future, because this is the first weekend all year in MotoGP, Joe, where it's been truly unpredictable. And I'll be honest, if someone picked Fernando Aldegar to win in our pick a winner game, I tip my hat to you, and you deserve $100, because I don't think anyone in a million years would have predicted this guy to win this race. So kudos to him, and we'll see if he can win more races in the future. And I believe we also have a comment on Denver. From Denver before we move on. And he said Marc Marquez won't set out Phillip Island, but set out 2 races before going on to celebrate championship win in the last race of the year and cruise around. Yeah, knowing Mark, I'm sure he'll try to push the race as soon as possible. But like I said, logically it would be smart for him to set out, but maybe his love for the sport, just too much, and he just wants to be out there racing. We'll see what Mark decides to do moving forward. And Joe, we have an update on the grid ranking this week.
Yes, we do. We don't have an updated grid ranking graphic just due to the disqualification of Riley Herbst. We wanted to make sure we get that all updated. Shouldn't be much of an impact, but we can tell you, of course, as everyone knows, Alex Palou is still the leader. Of course, he has already clinched the grid ranking. The big development, Marc Marquez has fallen to 3rd place. So Sebastian Ogier is now 2nd place. And, of course, Sebastian Ogier is going to be running the rest of the season in World Rally Championship. Could potentially even take that championship. So it's going to be very interesting to see how he's going to do the next few race weekends. Not a whole lot of changes in the top 10 position-wise. NASCAR, of course, we saw a couple of little changes with the Roval. Outside the grid ranking, when it comes to the grid rating for NASCAR, Shane Van Gisbergen has moved into the top 10, 8th place with his win. So it's very interesting to see how that is shaping up. And, of course, we will have the full updated graphics and standings across social media at Grid Network TV tonight. And, of course, Matthew, I know, is working hard for gridnetworktv.com, and that article, which will also have the grid ranking update for all the NASCAR drivers. That is all from the grid ranking. Let's switch over to our shining moment.
Yeah, that's right. Time for our great one shining moment from this racing weekend. If you're watching here live or on replay, to let us know down in the chat. What's the one thing that stood out to you the most? What whether it was from MotoGP in Indonesia, Formula One in Singapore, or NASCAR at the Charlotte Roval. And Joe, I'll start with you. What's your one shining moment?
For me, the shining moment, I think it has to come from NASCAR, the Cup Series, and that's going to go out to the driver that got the win, Shane Van Gisbergen. I think a lot of us are not anticipating a Shane Van Gisbergen win in the next few race weekends in the 2025 NASCAR Cup Series schedule. But still, you got to look at what he has done. As a rookie, yes, I know he had a couple starts at Chicago, other road courses, but this first full season, he has set such a high bar for rookie winning the races this year. I still remember when back in the day, the old record was 2 wins by Davey Allison. And then here comes Tony Stewart, breaks that record. Then here comes Jimmy Johnson. Shane Van Gisbergen, say what you want to say about, oh, well, he did it on road course. He's a road course ace. That's just part of the deal. That's part of motorsports. Trackhouse knew what they were doing. We got so many road courses. You have a driver that could win them all. We're going to bring him. And guess what? How many times have we seen road course ringers come in and not win them all? It still took a lot of effort from Shane Van Gisbergen to win them all. Of course, he has to be a favorite for next year at San Diego. But overall, I think you got to look at what he did this year as a rookie, winning those races, getting such a historical mark that his name's going to be on the history book for a long time. I don't know if we're going to see a rookie break that record for quite some time, Kobe. I mean, maybe I could be wrong. Maybe Connor Zilisch is just going to shock the world next year and steal all the wins at the road courses, but that's a hard task for any rookie. So I think Shane Van Gisbergen, my shining moment because of what he did today and full reflection of his season as a Cup Series rookie.
Yeah, for sure. SVG doing some incredible things in the Cup Series right now and also showing progress on the ovals as well. You remember he got up into the top 5 in New Hampshire before Brad Keselowski dove low down in the turns 1 and 2 and ended up taking him out of that event. And if it hadn't been for that, I wonder if SVG would have gotten the top 10 at New Hampshire because it seemed like he really gelled with that track right from the start. And in Kansas, ended up getting his long-awaited top 10 on pace. It wasn't because of those crazy crashes that happened. He literally drove up there and ran with the best of the best. So if he can continue learning these ovals, I'm not sure if I'll go for it. As Denver said earlier, that he'll put the Cup field in fear, but I certainly think he can potentially become a driver who can run up in the top 20 week in and week out in the Cup Series on any type of racetrack. But I'm going to give my shining moment to the rest of the podium finishers at the Charlotte Roval, Kyle Larson and Christopher Bell, simply for the fact that they were able to hang with SVG at the Charlotte Roval. And for much of this season on these road courses outside of COTA, nobody's been able to do anything with Shane Van Gisbergen because every single road course race, SVG has basically smashed the Cup Series field and nobody could do anything with him. But Kyle Larson, Christopher Bell, they were right up there with him. And they challenged one of the best we've seen on the road courses in stock cars. And I know SVG, won by a large margin over 15 seconds again, but that doesn't tell the full story because, the others pitted. They were banking on, a late race caution, and they would have had fresh tires and advantage over SVG at the end. But if it wasn't for that, Larson Bell, I think they took a huge step forward in their road course racing program this weekend at the Roval to try to get closer to SVG because it was just those three at the front of the field and nobody else really had anything for the 88. But in the right circumstances, I think the 5 of the 20 could have potentially challenged that 88 for the win today. But so kudos to them for being able to improve their road course racing skills as SVG has raised the bar to an enormously high level.
An enormously high level set by Shane Van Gisbergen. Of course, next year it's going to be interesting to see what the next big rookie a lot of people are talking about, Connor Zilisch, is going to do. And tomorrow, Grid Encore, Ben and Brad are going to talk about what Connor Zilisch did this weekend, earning his 10th win of the year. So be sure to subscribe, hit that bell icon so you don't miss Ben and Brandon on Grid Encore tomorrow. And subscribe to us right here on YouTube. Hit that bell icon so you don't miss any of our programming. And follow us across social media, Grid Network TV, gridnetworktv.com. Max is going to have his article up later as well. Plus Tanner Smith, having his new article focusing on the 2002 season and 2003 season for Matt Kenseth and how that has changed essentially a lot of what we hear about the sport and crowning a champion. Wednesday, Grid Tonight, the latest in motorsports news recap with Kobe, as well as Joshua Birch and Matt White, who will have the full Grid Endurance Performance Index update. Plenty of lead changes. Not sure it's going to be one this race weekend, but definitely worth watching. Big thank you to all our investors, Colin, Michelle, Mark, Rob, David, and Match for investing into Grid Network each and every month through Patreon. Link in the video description. And of course, you can scan the QR code on your screen to invest in us that way. For Kobe Lambeth, Tanner Smith, and Matthew Bro, I'm Joe San Diego. Thank you for watching today's program. We'll see you next time.